Before we begin this, I just want to say hello. My name is Jentel. I'm a real person because a lot of people think that I'm not for some reason. You can check my other channel called Jentel Games if you don't believe me. But I'm going to be reading you guys a story. I just wanted to start that off as the intro for the channel intro since I haven't posted anything besides an intro video. So let's begin this story. This story is called Monsters of Hollowridge. If you ever drive down the upper stretch of Highway 43 after sunset, there's a small exit you're not supposed to see. No signs, no lights, just a cracked, narrow road, curling into the trees like something alive, trying to pull you closer. Locals call it Hollowridge, though most won't say the name out loud. Not because they're scared of the town, not because talking about it invites the wrong kind of attention. And if there was one thing you learned very fast in Hollowridge, is that the attention is dangerous. The rules sound stupidly simple. If you ever go to Hollowridge, you can't leave. Not at night, not in the morning, not ever. People laugh at that until they try to prove it wrong, because the moment you attempt to cross the boundary, your body falls in ways it shouldn't. Your heart tightens, your lungs shrink, the world tilts. And if you don't turn back in time, that's it, game over. But the reason why is even worse. The town isn't the thing trapping you, the monsters are. But before we get into that, what those things are, or why they only come out at night, you need to understand the last outsider who entered Hollowridge before everything truly went downhill. His name was Daniel Mercer, a surveyor whose job was as boring as his name. According to the county records, his last work log was a routine Site 43 North soil stability check. Nothing about the town, nothing about getting lost, nothing that would explain why his truck was discovered abandoned days later. But he had dash cam footage. Starts at 6:14 p.m. Lights fading. Tree thick on both sides. You hear him mutter, "Didn't even know a road was back here." The camera shakes. The pavement cracks. Get worse, and then without warning, the footage cuts out for 5 seconds. When it comes back, Daniel was already on the center of Hollowridge. No transition, no fade. Just forest, one frame. Town to the next. People who analyzed the video later said that change wasn't natural. It was like Hollowridge didn't exist until the moment Daniel needed to see it. Then something taps the side of his truck. Soft knock. Not enough to scare him, but enough to make him whisper, "Hello?" Another knock follows, closer to the back of the truck this time. 3 seconds later, Daniel panics and hits the gas, spinning the truck around and racing back towards the woods. Came back 10 feet from the tree line before the footage freezes and stops. No more video, no audio, no GPS. It ends exactly where the town boundary begins. The next time anyone saw his truck, it was empty. People in Hollowridge don't talk about him. They don't talk about outsiders. They don't talk about anything that happened to Daniel Mercer. But the reason for their silence is simple and horrifying. They're afraid the monsters might hear their names. Because the creatures in Hollowridge aren't like anything you've imagined. They don't have a consistent shape. They mimic one. Think of a silhouette made of smoke trying to look human, but never quite getting the proportions right. Their arms stretch too far, their legs bend a little too much, their heads tilt at angles no neck should allow, and they don't walk, they glide, quietly, curiously, like they always learning how the body works. The town calls them afterwalkers. They only appear after sunset. They avoid direct light. They study movement, they inhabit shadows. And the most disturbing part yet, they don't attack unless you break the rule. The moment you try to leave, they come for you, not to kill you, but to enforce something much older than the town itself. A deal. 34 years ago, Hollowridge wasn't cursed. It was dying. Like any small rural town, businesses closing, families moving away, nothing left but empty streets and abandoned houses. Then something started stalking the edges of the forest. Livestock were found drained of blood. People went missing without a trace. The sheriff back then, Marilyn Horn, wrote in one of her final reports that the victims were taken by something that stalks the darkness. Everyone assumed she meant animals until the church bells rang at 3:17 a.m. The bells weren't wide to ring at night, but they didn't stop them. Families poured into the streets confused and terrified. And then they saw them, tall, thin shadows, drifting through the fog, moving too smoothly, too deliberately, watching. Nobody remembers who fired the first shot, but the bullets didn't matter. The creatures kept coming. Then the sheriff stepped forward and did something nobody can fully explain. She spoke to them. Witnesses said the monsters stopped, as if listening. Sheriff Horn offered them a deal. Leave the townspeople alive, and Hollowridge would never leave. The creatures accepted. Nobody knows how the sheriff survived the conversation. Some say she didn't. Others say the price she paid wasn't visible, but the deal held. Since then, the people of Hollowridge stay. Anyone born there lives there until they die. Anyone who enters by accident becomes bound to the same rule. The Afterwalkers protect the town from whatever worst stain lurks deeper in the forest. A thing nobody talks about, but everyone fears. And the townspeople repay that protection by staying put and feeding the creatures with a steady supply of fear, memories, and presence. Not blood, not flesh. Fear. Fear isn't just a feeling. Biologically, fear pumps cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing tightens, your pupils dilate. The chemical storm is noticeable to predators. Sharks can detect stress hormones in the water. Dogs can smell panic through their sweat. Fear was a measurable signature. It wasn't something involved or even evolved to consume emotional energy the way animals consume pheromones. Hollowridge is a banquet. And the Afterwalkers? They're at the top of the food chain. People who try to escape rarely make it far. Some collapse minutes from the boundary, their hearts giving out. Others stagger back into the town, shaking uncontrollably, unable to speak. But the worst fate belongs to those who push too far, because sometimes the Afterwalkers don't kill them. Sometimes they learn from them. Sometimes they copy them. Months after Daniel Mercer vanished, someone reported seeing a figure standing in the old church. It wore a jacket like Daniel's, boots like Daniel's, but its arms were too long, its head twitched, and it moved distortedly, as if something was trying to understand the shape it had borrowed, but didn't quite know how. Since then, the monsters have gotten better at mimicking sounds, words, voices, and memories. They knock on doors at night, pretending to be loved ones. They whisper through windows in voices that shouldn't exist. They stand outside bedrooms, heads tilted, waiting for the moment someone believes enough to open the door. But the imitation is never perfect. There's always something a little off. Too slow, too smooth, too emotionless, like a puppet learning its strings. The truth is, the Afterwalkers aren't interested in killing the townspeople. They need them alive. A dead town means no more fear, no more memories, no more emotional sustenance. So the creatures, they just maintain balance. They stalk the streets, they remind everyone that they're there, they prevent escapes, and they keep the fear. And the townspeople pretend to live normal lives during the day. The place looks average at sunrise. Kids play in yards, people fix fences and hang laundry, bird chirps, streets look safe, but under the surface it's constant, quiet dread. Every person in Hollowridge knows that they're living on borrowed time, trapped between two evils, the monsters that feed on fear and the thing in the forest that feeds on something else. And that brings us back to the most horrifying question of all. If the Afterwalkers need the town, and the townspeople need the Afterwalkers, what happened if the creatures ever learn they don't need either? Some say the monsters are getting smarter, braver, curious. They test the boundaries now. They push against windows. They scratch the inside of the walls. They repeat names, and lately, they've begun doing something they never used to do. They're trying to speak. No mimic voices, no replay sounds. Speak. An elderly man swears he heard one say. A young girl said one, hissed, hungry. Outside her window, another resident swears a creature repeated her name over and over, slowly getting clearer each time. If that's true, then Daniel Mercer wasn't the last outsider to disappear. He was the first lesson. Because every time someone new arrives in Hollowridge, the creatures learn something. A new voice, a new fear pattern, a new memory to mimic, and eventually, they'll learn enough to make a perfect imitation, a perfect human copy. Something that could walk out of the shadows and into the daylight without falling apart. Something that could leave Hollowridge. And if that happens, the deal is over. And the rest of the world becomes the new Hollowridge. Until then, the people here cling to the rules. They shut their doors at night. They whisper warnings. They pray to God that stopped listening decades ago. They watch the tree line for movement. They fear the sound of the footsteps in the dark. Because every night, without fail, the Afterwalkers return. Listening, learning, waiting. And the only thing worse than a monster that haunts you is a monster that's learning how to be you. And that is the first book of The Monsters of Hollowridge. If you enjoy it, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment. Book 2. The night the monster started knocking on every door in Hollowridge wasn't supposed to happen. The townsfolk had lived with the same pattern for 34 years. The creatures drifted through the streets after sunset, watching, listening, testing doors, and learning voices. But they stayed outside. That was one of the unspoken rules of the deal. We stayed in our homes and they stayed in the night. But rules in Hollowridge never last forever. Not when the afterwalkers are still evolving. It began with a sound almost too soft to notice. A faint creaking, floorboard setting. A whisper of weight pressing down on the old wood at night. I thought it was just a house adjusting to the temperature drop. But the footsteps came again, slow, deliberate, inside my hallway. I held my breath. It was impossible. Every door and window was locked, every entrance sealed. Nobody had come inside yet. Someone or something was moving just outside my bedroom door. I wasn't alone. The footsteps paused, then a gentle tap echoed from the outside end of the hall. Another tap followed, faint but unmistakable. A mirror image, a perfect rhythm. The same pacing repeated in other homes across Hollowridge. You could hear distant thuds muffled through walls, synchronized like a heartbeat shared by the entire town. And then the knocking started. Not from the house, from all of them. A chorus of knocks perfectly in sync, echoing through the streets like a funeral drumline. I heard my name whisper through the crack under the door. Evan. My blood ran cold, not because it spoke, but because it didn't try to disguise its voice this time. It didn't sound like my mother or my sister or Daniel Mercer. It sounded like me. The whisper crawled up my spine like ice water. Evan, open the door. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. Every instinct screamed to run, but where could I go? I was trapped inside, the only safe place in the town designed to be a cage. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, until it felt like the house itself was shaking. Then it stopped. Silence swept across Hollowridge, like someone had flipped a switch. For the first time that night, the afterwalkers were waiting. The morning sun looked wrong, pale, too cold for summer, as if it barely managed to climb over the tree line. When I stepped outside, May was already waiting on the porch, arms crossed tightly, jaw clenched. You heard it too? She said. I think everyone did. She nodded slowly. They've never done that before. What does it mean? Her eyes darkened. It means they're changing us. And they're changing again. The sheriff called an emergency meeting at the church. The building looked older than the night before. Peeling paint, deeper cracks in the walls. Warped wood. Hollowridge always felt like it aged in waves, like time didn't move naturally inside its borders. People shuffled into the pews, hollow-eyed and frightened. Sheriff Horn stepped forward. Last night wasn't random, she said. They were looking for something or someone. Her gaze landed on me. My pulse spiked. What did I do? You survived the boundary longer than anyone else, she said. Your fear wasn't different, sharper. Something about it changed them. That doesn't make sense. It does, she replied. If fear isn't just their food, but their information. A murmur rippled through the room. I felt sick. May leaned close and whispered, they remember you. Remember? They mimic things. No, she said. Mimic is shallow. Remember is deeper. They're learning you. I didn't want to believe her, but then Sheriff Horn opened an old ledger from her father's time as sheriff. This is a list of everyone who disappeared into the afterwalkers, she said. Pages filled with names crossed out in red ink. When you hear them speak, they use pieces of people they've absorbed over decades. Fragments of memory, trauma, fear. So, Daniel Mercer, he is them now, she said. A part of him is. A chill crawled through the room. It wasn't just mimicry. It wasn't just hunger. It was evolution. That night, something new happened. The creatures appeared at dusk as usual, long-limbed shadows slipping between houses. But then one of them drifted into the middle of the main street and stopped directly under a street lamp. Instead of dissolving like it should have, it held its form. Its body flickered like static, trying to stabilize. It lasted 4 seconds before vanishing into the shadows. 4 seconds, too long. The next day, the townsfolk stayed inside. After sunset, terrified the creatures might try again. But the real danger came at dawn. The moment light touched my bedroom wall, I felt a faint buzzing started behind the plaster. Not mechanical, organic, like dozens of tiny vibrations rippling across bone. Then it happened. A voice whispered through the wall. Evan. I froze. It was the voice of someone I hadn't heard in over a decade. My childhood best friend, a kid who had drowned when we were 12. Come inside, it said gently. I missed you. I stumbled backwards. The voice was perfect. The cadence, the tone, even the way he used to drag the last syllable of my name. But I'd never spoken about him, not once, not to anyone in Hollowridge. How could they know this? I whispered to the empty room. The wall responded. They know everything you fear. I ran out the door. Sheriff Horn was already in the street, her face pale. They spoke to you, didn't they? That wasn't possible, I said. That voice, that memory. I haven't thought about that in years. May appeared beside her, out of breath. They're pulling from deeper memories now. Things they couldn't know unless they had more access. Access to what, I asked. She swallowed. To you. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floor, every flick of the light made me jump. Midnight hit, and Hollowridge held its breath, but nothing came. No footsteps, no knocks, no whispers. The absence of the monsters was worse than their presence. Just after 2 a.m., the street lights flickered. Then one by one, they went dark. Every window went black at the same instant. The moonlit vanished as if swallowed. The entire town submerged in a void darker than the power outage. It was like someone had erased light itself. Then I heard the hum. Deep, vibrating, powerful. The same hum I felt in the field with Lily, but amplified 100 times. The ground shook. My bones vibrated. The air thickened. The hum grew louder, resonating like a chorus of unseen voices trying to synchronize. Sheriff Horn burst into my house, grabbing my arm. They're not feeding tonight, she yelled over the noise. They're communicating. With who? I screamed back. You. The walls rippled, shadowed, pressed through the darkness like hands trying to reach through cloth. The hum rose higher, vibrating the house. And right next to my ear, something whispered, Found you. The lights flashed back on, the shadows vanished, but something was wrong. Every person in town stepped outside at the same time. Their eyes all drifted to the same spot, the boundary road. Footprints led across the invisible line, human footprints, but not human-shaped, longer, wider, then toes warped. The arches stretched. The prints were too deep, pressed in the earth with unnatural force. Sheriff Horn knelt beside me. These aren't yours, she whispered. These weren't mine. They weren't anyone's in Hollowridge. The townsfolk backed away, some gasping, some crying, others frozen in terror. What does it mean? I asked. Horn looked at the tree line, her face hollow. It means one of them crossed, she said. I stared at her. That's impossible. The moment they hit sunlight. This one didn't hit sunlight, she said. It walked out while the town was in total darkness. But why didn't they keep going? Her voice broke. They're waiting. For what? For you. The entire town stepped back as if something was already behind me. I turned slowly. The wind dead still. The morning air too cold. The footprints pointed towards the forest behind Hollowridge. The monsters didn't escape by accident. They were exploring. They were scouting for me. And the worst part wasn't that an afterwalker had stepped outside the boundary. It was that it did so and survived. Because now they know they could, and nothing in Hollowridge would ever control them again. Book 3. For the first time since Hollowridge made its deal, the monsters crossed the line meant to contain them. And the moment Sheriff Horn said the words, "They're waiting for you," I felt something cold settle under my skin. like the fear wasn't coming from the outside me anymore, but crawling toward me from the forest. The footprints at the boundary were still fresh and pressed deep into the dirt as if whatever made them was heavier than it looked. The afterwalkers never left marks. They drifted across the ground like shadows sliding over water. But the creature had stepped with weight, intention, and purpose. It wasn't testing the boundary, it was breaking it. People stepped back from the prints as if they might suddenly move on their own. May grabbed my arm, her grip trembling. They don't leave town, she whispered. They never left town. That's the problem, Sheriff Horn said. Now they know they can. The air felt wrong, thick, charged, as if Hollowridge itself was holding its breath. Everyone inside, Horn barked. Families scattered back to their homes. Curtains snapped shut. Doors slammed. Locks clicked with frantic depression. May poured me with her towards the boarding house. But before we reached the porch, she stopped. They were calling you last night, she said. They weren't knocking. They weren't signaling. They wanted you to hear. They wanted you to follow. Follow what? I asked. She pointed towards the forest beyond the road. The trees stood unnaturally still, branches stiff, like they were afraid to move. There's something out there, she said. Something the Atherwalkers never wanted us to see. The sheriff overheard and shook her head furiously. No, nobody goes in the woods. The deal was that they protect us from whatever hurts anything or haunts beyond the tree line. If the creatures are barking their own rule, it means whatever's out there is worse. Before I could respond, the street lamps flickered again, once, twice. They went dark completely. That wasn't supposed to happen in daylight. May's voice broke. It's happening during the day now. The changes, they're speeding up. The hum started again, soft at first. A low tremor beneath our feet, the same vibration I had felt in the field with Lily, but stronger this time, as if dozens of creatures were moving under the ground instead of across it. I staggered back, gripping my chest. The sheriff steadied herself against the mailbox, her eyes wide with panic. The deal is breaking, she whispered, piece by piece, and then something worse happened. From the woods across the boundary, far beyond the place where the footprints disappeared, a sound drifted through the trees. A laugh, not human, not animal. A warped, distorted laugh that rose and fell in pitch, like something was stretching and recording an old tape. May's hand tightened around me. The sheriff drew her gun, though everyone knew bullets did nothing. The laugh rose higher, closer, then fell silent. That wasn't one of them, May breathed. That was different. The sheriff's jaw clenched. Everyone inside, now. She drove us towards the boarding house and slammed the door behind us. The walls rattled as another vibration rippled through the ground. Small knickknacks, photos, shaking on shelves. Ruth, the boarding house owner, looked terrified. The lamps outside are dead, she said. They'd never gone out during the day. May shut every curtain in the room, her movements frantic. If the afterwalkers are changing, they're not just adapting, they're reaching to something. Ruth stepped back. What are they reaching for? I opened my mouth, but the sheriff answered first. To the one that walked out. We sat in silence as the sheriff paced the living room, thinking. After a few minutes, they stopped and looked at me. Tell me everything that happened the night before, she said. I explained the knocking, the synchronized steps, the way the voices shifted, the dead darkness, the hum, and the whisper at my ear saying, found you. Horn swallowed hard. They weren't hunting you, she said quietly. They were locating you. What's the difference, I asked. Hunting is instinct, she said. Locating is intent. It means they wanted something from you, something beyond fear. May sat down slowly, eyes widening. They weren't trying to bring him to them. They were trying to bring something else. What something, I asked. She pointed at the forest. Whatever made that laugh. Night came closer than it should have. The sun dropped like someone poured it down. And the moment darkness fell over Hollowridge, the creatures emerged. But they didn't wander like usual. They didn't drift or circle the houses. They stood still, perfectly still. A row of thin silhouettes lining the properties facing the forest. May peered through the crack in the curtain. They're watching something. Ruth turned pale. They're guarding us. The sheriff moved closer to the window. No, they're guarding themselves. And then when she saw what they were staring at, something moved in the trees. Huge, slow, heavy, not gliding like the afterwalkers, but stomping. Each footstep sending a small tremor into the ground. The trees shifted like they were bending away from it. But we never saw the creature itself. We saw its shadow. A massive swollen shape stretching across the forest floor, taller than any house in Hollowridge, wide and wrong, like a body with too many limbs or not enough, impossible to make sense of. When the shape came closer to the boundary, the afterwalkers reacted. They folded, literally folded. Their elongated bodies bent inward, collapsing like cards being pressed together for the first time since any of us had seen them. The creatures looked afraid. The sheriff stepped back from the window. No, she whispered. It can't be. What is it? I asked. She turned toward me. It's the thing the original deal was meant to protect us from. May grabbed my arm again. They struck the deal with the afterwalkers to keep the thing out. But now one of them crossed the line. If they broke the contract first, Ruth gasped. The thing in the forest thinks the deal is gone. Outside, the air changed, and it didn't get colder or windier. It got heavier, as if the sky itself thickened. The afterwalkers began letting out faint, glitching screeches. Not loud enough to be screams, but sharp enough to crack the silence. Then someone knocked on the door. 3 slow, steady knocks. Not like the afterwalkers' imitation taps. Not like a mimic. The knocking was deep, too strong. Each knock reverberated through the walls like a hammer striking bone. Ruth whimpered. Nobody answered that. The sheriff aimed a gun at the door. Get back. Another knock shook the frame, dust falling from the ceiling. The voice that followed froze all of us in place. Let me in. It wasn't a voice made from memory. It wasn't a voice that belonged to anyone. It sounded like something trying to copy speech without understanding it. Warped, distorted, multiple tones layered on top of one another, all slightly out of sync. Let me in. May clamped a hand over her mouth to stop herself from screaming. The door handle twisted slowly, deliberately. The sheriff yelled, "Stay back," and fired into the floorboards beside the door as a warning shot. The sound echoed through the house, but the handle kept turning. Then the creatures outside reacted. All of them. They lunged towards the door, towards the sound, moving faster than we had ever seen them move. Their bodies contorted, limbs bending at possible angles as they slammed themselves against the wood from outside. The handle snapped back in place and the knocking stopped. For a moment, the entire street went silent again. Then something screamed from the forest, a massive guttural roar that sent birds exploding into the sky. The shadow beyond the tree line shifted violently, retreating deeper into the woods. The afterwalkers went still. None of them moved for almost an hour. When dawn finally arrived, they melted away like a smoke in the sunlight, leaving the town in turned and stunned silence. May finally spoke. They were protecting us. The sheriff shook her head. No, they were protecting the boundary. They don't want that thing crossing any more than we do. I stepped outside, stared at the footprints that had broken the deal. The ones leading out of Hollowridge and into the forest. What happens now, I asked. Sheriff Horn hoisted her gun aside. Now, the afterwalkers are no longer the biggest threat here. May looked at me with fear in her eyes, and whatever stepped out last night, it wants you. I swallowed hard. Why me? The sheriff answered without hesitation. Because you broke the fear threshold, and now something older is awake. I looked back at the forest where the trees still trembled. The creatures of Hollowridge were no longer the worst thing in its place. Something big had noticed me, and it was coming. If you're still listening to this, I hope you enjoyed this story. This is a story that's going to probably go on to book 6, probably book 7. I just read book 3 for you guys. So if you enjoy, make sure to subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. I am a human being. I'm not AI, and I am reading this story to you guys as I sit here. I hope you guys have a great day, great night, and a beautiful sleep. And I'll see y'all in the next video.